Welcome to the Alt-Shift-X live stream, patron-only live stream for episode 2 of Season 7. The plan is that I'm going to go over some bits and pieces from the upcoming video, the explained video about the episode, but instead of sort of regurgitating points that are going to be in the video anyway, I'm going to mostly focus on stuff that might not make it into the video, stuff that I'm less certain about, stuff that I'm still thinking about, and stuff that you guys might have some input on, and also all of the jokes that are too dumb to include in the actual video. And after we do that, I'm going to go and answer your questions. So there's this Reddit thread in the description of this video with all these lovely questions that you've submitted. You can upvote them and downvote them, and at the end of this stream, I'll respond to the top voted comments. But I'll just make sure that you can all hear me, you can all see me. I see the live chat here. Looks like you're good. So we'll begin with the stream. This thumbnail, by the way, I'm fairly happy with, having Sam's face in the thumbnail. I kind of would have preferred to put Arya in the thumbnail, because her scene with Nymeria was so interesting, and because we get this lovely shot of Arya's face that's like perfect for a thumbnail. But I already used Arya's face in the Season 7 Episode 1 thumbnail, and I'm loath to double up like that, so I figured we'd use Sam, who has quite a funny expression in this shot. But anyway, so Varys, I thought, was one of the most interesting early scenes in this episode. Varys has sort of taken a back seat lately. In like Season 6, it was really weird how they sort of trotted out Varys once in Meereen and sort of said, hey look, there's this big mystery about the Sons of the Harpy. Who's the leader of the Sons of the Harpy? And there are all these interesting theories, like, ooh, what if Varys is the leader of the Sons of the Harpies, trying to get Daenerys to go west sooner and stuff. But that mystery didn't actually end up having an answer, and we just sort of forgot about it, and Varys just didn't play a very big role lately. And then we finally got him addressed by Daenerys in this episode, and she questions his loyalty, as well you should, because she points out that, well, you served King Robert, but you plotted against him. You served my father, the Mad King, but you plotted against him, or at least we know that he plotted against Aerys through his paranoid whisperings, Grimmer Wormtongue style, into the Mad King's ear, trying to undermine him, but that's another story. And also, Varys, like, sort of supported Viserys, Dany's brother, until he proved too useless to be worth supporting, and now Varys claims he supports Daenerys, but can Daenerys truly rely on Varys? So it's very legitimate to be questioning his loyalty like that, but Varys argues that, well, you know, I serve the realm, I grew up on the streets as an orphan, all I really care about is the realm being well, the people being protected, and I don't care who's ruling, as long as they're doing a good job. Which is interesting, because that's the exact sort of thing he says in Season 1 and in Book 1. Varys is like, yeah, I serve the realm. He tells Ned that. In the books, I think that's a lie, because there's all this Blackfire conspiracy stuff going on. There are all these connections, like Illyrio Mopatis and to young Griff, and to Sarah and stuff, which might suggest there's something more personal going on with Varys' motivations, ultimately. But I think what they're going at in the show is that Varys really is telling the truth. He really just cares about the realm being stable and peaceful and just, and he has no personal hidden motivations, which is fine, I think, for the show, because they've got to simplify stuff. But I think you've also got to question whether that makes any sense. Like, if Varys really was just legitimately interested in protecting the realm, would he have undermined Robert and undermined Aerys and contributed to general instability and war? Would he have supported Viserys, of all people? Would he really not have realized that Viserys was a few cupcakes short of a picnic? Would it have made any sense for him to go through that whole plot with the Dothraki and Daenerys and stuff? Does Varys' character make any sense in this show continuity? I'm not sure it does, honestly, but I'm not sure how deeply to go into trying to understand this new Varys in the video, because it might just be confusing to people. Yeah, Shiera asks why wouldn't Varys just support Rhaegar in that period under Aerys, which is a really good question. I think it makes sense in the book continuity that Aerys is actually trying to undermine the Targaryens, both Rhaegar and Aerys, to actually support his Blackfire mates. But yeah, in the show, I'm not sure how you account for that. Next bit, so Melisandre was another interesting scene. It's always funny when the show acknowledges the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai, because there's so much detail and complexity in that stuff in the books. But in the show, they're just occasionally like, oh yeah, and there's like this prophecy as well, like that guy's kind of Jesus. All right, moving on. Like they just sort of mention that, yeah, you're the savior of the world. Moving on. Which again is fine because I don't have time to get into all the fucking signs and the comet and the blood and the whatever. But it is always funny when they mention it. And yeah, they mention here that, you know, you have a role, but so does another, which I think supports that whole idea about both Jon and Daenerys being Azor Ahai together. So yeah, I don't think there's even that much to say about that. Everyone kind of knows that they're the protagonists and they're going to be the heroes in the end. Though of course we don't know exactly what that might look like. It might involve like some kind of Nissa situation where Jon has to kill Daenerys, though I don't think they would do that in the show. Anyway, Littlefinger. Littlefinger's one of the other super interesting situations in this episode. He's a bit like Varys. He's this complicated plotter and schemer who the show has not been able to keep all of their complexity when moving to the show. The reason why I use this shitty Simpsons meme, remember in The Simpsons when like Bart shows he shows like Ralph when like Lisa is mean to Ralph on TV, and then Bart's like, look, he goes like frame by frame and he says, look Lisa, you can see the exact moment where Ralph's heart breaks on TV. What I'm going for Littlefinger is showing the exact moment when all of his plots and his schemes just collapse and turn to rubble, at the moment when he hears about the arrival of Daenerys and her dragons. Because Littlefinger's got all these political schemes that he's running for years and years and years and years. At least in the books and the early seasons he did. And, you know, he was orchestrating the War of the Five Kings by lying about the dagger, and he was, you know, slowly clawing up political power piece by piece. He got, like, Harrenhal, then he got his claws in the Vale, and now he's trying to get his influence on the North. Like, he's got this grand scheme to gain power, and apparently he wants the throne in the end. But none of that accounts for the dragons. None of that accounts for the White Walkers. He can't plot his way around that stuff. His schemes can't help him when a giant runs him down. So this, I think, is the moment in the show when he really sort of realizes, shit, that things have changed, the calculus has shifted, and it's not in my favor, and there might be nothing I can do about that. Like, I mean, if not that's what literally Littlefinger is thinking, I think that might be the reality. I think that, sadly enough, in these last two seasons of Thrones, the story does not really have time or room for these schemers. Varys and Littlefinger, I think this is their symbolic, if not literal, decline in this season, because their plots and their schemes are no longer relevant in the face of the supernatural evils. Be interesting to see if that's how it goes down in the books. In the books, I doubt George Martin created all of this complex plotting and scheming just to throw it away when the dragons turn up. But it would be difficult to reconcile, wouldn't it? Which might be part of why The Winds of Winter is taking a while. Cersei in the throne room. I thought this was an interesting scene. I enjoyed the political rhetoric. I enjoyed how Cersei was demonizing her opponent and putting herself forward as a symbol of security and peace and stability and reliability. I enjoyed how she talked about, like, well, there were obvious political parallels to make, right? Because Cersei was talking about, like, oh, these foreign these foreign people are going to come from across the sea, and they're going to come to our land, and they're going to steal our stuff, and they're going to rape our women. And it's impossible not to draw a connection between that sort of rhetoric and some of the rhetoric from, like, right-wing populists in our current world now. And I can already hear your keyboards chattering, because the moment you mention real-world politics on YouTube, everyone just jumps on you. And so I am wary of that. So I'm not sure how specific or how much I want to get into the political connections. I do want to acknowledge them to some point, because it's interesting that Cersei, and realistic that Cersei is using political rhetoric in a very similar way to the way real-world politicians talk, when they're trying to say, look, I am the sole bringer of peace and security. Anyone else will just bring chaos and destruction, so you need to come and support me. It's politics. It's Game of Thrones. It's good. So yeah, I enjoyed that Cersei scene. And then there was the stuff with Sam in the Citadel with Archmaester Ebrose. And one of the things that everyone's talking about is the idea that, like, Ebrose is talking about, like, oh, I wrote this, like, dope history about, like, the wars since the death of King Robert. And Sam's like, well, maybe you should title it something more poetic. And he doesn't get to suggest his title, but everyone in the comments and things are like, ooh, what if it was The Song of Ice and Fire? What if Game of Thrones is a series of books canonically written by Sam? Which I think is a fun idea, but it's a bit cute, I think. I think it's a bit on the nose. It's because it's what happens in The Lord of the Rings, isn't it? Like, The Hobbit is written by Bilbo, and The Lord of the Rings is it written by Frodo, or I think, or by Sam, or something? Like, I don't know. It's a cool little twisteroo to do. It's a cool little meta thing. But I think, yeah, it's a bit Samwell Gamgee, indeed. I don't think Game of Thrones will do it, because I think Game of Thrones will have enough cool things to do at the end. I think like, there are so many different ways they could frame the ending of Game of Thrones. There are so many moments and characters and perspectives they could take to make it really cool. Like, I don't know if they're gonna have time or the need for an extra little bit of saying, and then Sam put down his pencil, and then he went off to hang out with Rosie at the Prancing Pony, or whatever the fuck happens in The Hobbit. I don't think that's how they'll end Game of Thrones. But it is a cool idea, so I think I'll probably mention it in the explained video, because it is fun. Littlefinger and Jon in the crypts. I do want to talk a bit again about how important the crypts are in the books. All the Starks, like, dream about the crypts, and there are these weird sort of mystical vibes about the crypts, all these theories and speculations about what might be going on down in the crypts. But it doesn't seem as though much of that is super relevant in this show. It's nice in this particular shot. You can see the statue of Lyanna Stark behind Jon, who is, of course, Jon's mother. And a lot of people are asking, I think one of the Reddit questions asks whether Littlefinger knows that Lyanna is Jon's mother. And I think that's plausible. Like, I don't think it takes a genius to sort of go, Ned Stark was famously honorable, and fathering a bastard seems like an odd thing to do. Rhaegar Targaryen abducted and supposedly raped Lyanna Stark down in the south somewhere, and when Ned Stark went south to deal with Rhaegar and Lyanna and stuff, he came back north with a baby, and Lyanna was dead. I don't think it takes a genius to go, hey, maybe that baby actually came from Lyanna instead of Ned. Maybe that baby is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. So I don't think it's all that crazy to think maybe Littlefinger knows. But whether Littlefinger would be the person to reveal that to Jon, I think that would be weird tonally for this huge revelation of great emotional significance to Jon to come from a prick like Littlefinger. I do kind of prefer the idea that it comes from Bran. Although I wouldn't be all that surprised if, you know, like Jon has just left for Dragonstone. Maybe what'll happen is that Bran will arrive at Winterfell and he'll tell, like, Sansa and Arya or something, but Jon will be too busy with the wars and with all the crazy shit going on, that he'll never actually get time to be told about this stuff. And then you could almost, I mean, maybe you could even have some tragic thing where, like, John dies before he ever finds out or something. I don't know, but maybe the knowledge of his mother might be something that takes time to get to him. But also, it's hard to know exactly what that revelation will mean to John. Like, he'll sort of be like, oh, okay, I'm not Ned Stark's bastard, but I'm someone else's bastard. I've got, like, this Targaryen connection and this royal connection, and, like, how would he take that? And also, oh no, Daenerys, this QT dragon lady who he's probably got the hots for, she's my aunt now. Damn, that's not what I was hoping. So what exactly will the significance of R plus L equals J be to John? We don't really know. Will Littlefinger be the one to tell him? I kind of doubt it. But this scene is also kind of interesting in that Littlefinger is dumb. Like, why does he provoke John? Why does he go like, ooh, I sure loved Catelyn and I sure want to bang your sister? Like, why would you do that to John? Like, it's been said before, but, like, Peter in the books, Peter's whole thing is that, like, he's friendly and he seems harmless and he tries to be helpful, and that's part of why it's so cool that he's, like, secretly a great schemer and manipulator, and it's not obvious that he's sinister. Whereas in the show, he's always going like, ooh, but you know, what if the enemy from outside was actually within and it was me who knew? Like, Littlefinger's so obviously sinister in the show, which again is fine because I need to make it obvious for the watchers. But it's silly that he so obviously provokes the people around him. It's also kind of funny how Littlefinger mentions a bunch of different people in this scene. He mentions Ned, who Peter, of course, betrayed by betraying to Cersei, and Littlefinger mentions Tyrion, who he screwed over by lying about the knife, and he mentions Catelyn, who he screwed over by lying about the knife. He mentions Sansa, who he screwed over by handing her over to the Boltons. Like, it seems as though there are very few characters left in this story who Peter hasn't royally screwed over at some point or another. And it's hard not to think that he might get his comeuppance sometime soon. And then one of the interesting things is that Littlefinger mentions that he delivered Ned Stark's bones to Winterfell in the show. In the books, there's this whole other sort of side mystery going on. In the books, Hallis Mullen, who's just some Winterfell guardsman, he gets sent by Catelyn up to the north with Ned Stark's bones to be interned in the Winterfell crypts. But in the books, they never seem to arrive. Catelyn wonders, oh, I wonder what happened to the bones and Hallis Mullen. And then we learn from Barbary Dustin in the Winterfell crypts that she has been watching for the bones to pass north. Apparently the bones couldn't get through, Hallis Mullen couldn't get past Moat Cailin, but Barbary Dustin has been watching and waiting, and her goal is to prevent the bones from ever getting to Winterfell. She wants to feed Ned Stark's bones to her dogs, because she's got a bit of a vendetta against him. So it's sort of only tangentially related to what's going on in the episode, so I don't know if I'll sort of mention that story in the video, but it is an interesting little side plot, and I don't know where that's going. Will Ned's bones be a big deal? Will they be forgotten? Who knows? But it's a funny little aside, I think. Shireen and the dragon scale and stuff. I thought that whole sort of thing with Sam treating Jorah was interesting. And it's interesting also how Sam brings up Shireen. It's not super clear how grayscale works in the show relative to the books. Like in the books, it like seems to be like a thing that kids get grayscale sometimes, but they just sort of get over it. Whereas in the show, Stannis talked more about how like we went through this whole big important process to cure her and stuff. Whereas in the books, it's like it's not a cure; it's just kids just sort of spontaneously get over it sometimes. It's not super clear how all of that works. One of the ideas that's sort of floating around is the idea that since Dragonglass is possibly involved in the cure for grayscale in that book that Sam had last episode, maybe there's a connection with the fact that Shireen survived grayscale, given that she lived on Dragonstone, which is built on a mountain of Dragonglass. apparently. Maybe it was the proximity of all this dragon glass that helped her get cured. The sort of dumb reference that I want to make here is, you know, in South Park, when Magic Johnson survives AIDS by sleeping on piles of cash, like money is apparently the cure for AIDS. I kind of want to draw a connection there, but I feel like it might be too dumb. But anyway, the grayscale thing is kind of fun. And Arya and Nymeria. This was one of the more emotional scenes. I actually kind of like what they're doing with Arya in this season. Like, the last couple of seasons, the Arya storyline has been shaky at best. But now Arya's returned to Westeros, and I think what they're basically trying to communicate with her is that she's got this conflict, human heart in conflict with itself, where on one hand, she's got this desire for vengeance. She wants to kill, like the Faceless Man trained her. She wants to kill Queen Cersei and many others. But on the other hand, she's a Stark of Winterfell. She misses her family. She wants to see them again. And so she's drawn that way as well. She's sort of drawn in two different directions. But I think the scene with Nymeria is really interesting for a bunch of reasons. Some people were confused when Arya said to Nymeria, "That's not you." And the context of that is that Arya was sort of saying, "Oh, Nymeria, you should come to Winterfell with me. You should come and be my pet again. You should be my little doggo again. It'll be great. We'll sort of frolic through the fields together, and it'll be so much fun." But then she says, "That's not you." And that refers to a scene in season 1 where Ned Stark was like to Arya, "Yo, you need to be like a lady, and you need to marry a man, and you need to be the mother to a bunch of children, and you need to do the sewing and the washing up." And Arya said, "That's not me." So the parallel here is that Nymeria can't just come back and live the domestic life. Nymeria is like a wild, free wolf now, independent. And it's just not in Nymeria's nature to go back to the domestic life again. So Arya respects that, and she seems to sort of appreciate that, and so she lets Nymeria roam free. And the obvious parallel to Arya is like thinking, well, will Arya be able to return to the domestic life? Will Arya be able to just slot back into the Stark family? Hey guys, what did I miss? Will she be able to just return to a normal life? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe she's too much of a wild wolf. Maybe she's too much of a lone wolf. Maybe her experiences over the last few books and seasons have made her something changed fundamentally, something that needs to be alone, something that needs to hunt, something that needs to be dangerous, something that needs to kill. Maybe she can't fully return to her old life. But at the same time, that's clearly what she wants. She doesn't want to let go of her humanity. She doesn't want to let go of her Stark identity. So maybe she'll end up sort of trapped between these two extremes. If she can't be a ruthless, unfeeling assassin, but she also can't be a daughter of House Stark, what can she be? Which again sort of leads me to the conclusion that I think Arya will die, at least in the books. So yeah, really good scene, I thought. And it's also super fucking cool to see Nymeria again. Although, there's also the question of, like, will this wolf pack be used in some kind of battle at some point? And I suspect in the show it will not. I think in the books it will. I think George Martin has a quote, he said sometime that, like, you don't put a giant wolf pack in a story and not use it. I think George Martin has every intention of using Nymeria's wolf pack in a battle or some kind of Deus Ex Nymeria at some point. But I don't know if that'll happen in the show. Firstly, because the show has been really sort of minimalist about their use of the dire wolves, and I think that's due to like CGI reasons or dog wrangling reasons as much as anything else. They'd rather spend their CGI on dragons than on wolves, which I think is sort of fair enough. And the sort of tone of this scene between Nymeria and Arya, it was the tone of a farewell, I thought. I don't think this sort of set the tone for Nymeria returning. Maybe she will, I could see it happen, but I think this was a moment of putting Nymeria to rest in Arya's eyes in a lot of ways. So I'm inclined to think that we won't see Nymeria again in the show. But we'll see how it goes, I guess. But yeah, I enjoyed that scene with Arya. And with Hot Pie as well, I thought was nice. And obviously the scene with Hot Pie was about sort of reminding us of, yeah, Arya has this connection to humanity. She has these friends. She has these emotional connections, which are drawing her away from her ruthless, violent side of wanting to kill Cersei. And it was also just fucking sweet to see Hot Pie again. What a baller. Everyone else has been out fighting and killing each other and dying, and meanwhile Hot Pie's just been baking and having a nice time. It's hard to deny that he's probably made better life decisions than most of the people in Game of Thrones. Everyone else is fighting and having a bad time. He's just chilling, making pies. It's like that bit in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where they're like, oh, the dolphins are actually the most intelligent creatures on Earth, because while the humans have been out fighting and building cities and technology and blah, and all this human stuff that they're doing, the dolphins are just flipping about in the ocean having a lovely time. Hot Pie is the dolphins of Game of Thrones. And then there was a scene with the ship battle with the Greyjoys. And I thought that was fun. I thought in terms of an action scene, it sure was actiony. The moment with Theon and Yara was quite heartrending, obviously. I think in terms of the actual reality of the situation, Theon running towards Yara would not have saved her. Euron just probably would have killed Yara and Theon if Theon did run there. But the point of that scene was more sort of showing that Theon is in some way damaged by his torture by Ramsay, and he's unable to be courageous, and he's unable to fulfill his familial obligation towards Yara. And he cares about her, but he's unable to fully connect as a result of what he's experienced. And I think that was good. Euron, of course, was also entertaining as fuck in this scene. He was obviously channeling a bit of Victarion Greyjoy, running around chopping people up with an axe. We've never actually seen Euron fight in the books. And in the books, I suspect Euron probably might not even be that good at fighting. He's more of a talker than a fighter. He's more of a sorcerer than a swordsman. So I think the Euron of this show is indeed a sort of a combination of Victarion and Euron from the books. But one of the other components of this whole bit was the Sand Snakes. And, obviously the Sand Snakes are disliked by a lot of the community. The Dawn plot's obviously one of the weaker plots of the series. But I actually kind of thought the demise of these Sand Snakes was handled pretty well. Because, the problem with these characters was always that they were one note. They didn't have a lot of depth, they didn't have a lot going on. All they really ever did was sit around talking about how much they wanted to kill people and how much they wanted vengeance on people. They were introduced into this episode sitting on those hammocks going, I want to kill Cersei. No, I want to kill Cersei. Mama, mama. It's just fucking annoying and repetitive. But I think that was kind of used as an actual sort of a bit, because you see here in this shot, Nymeria is hung by her own whip and Abara is impaled on her own spear, I think, by the looks of it. And I think that what that could sort of symbolically be getting at is that they were the cause of their own demise, because it was because of the Sand Snakes' blind lust for revenge and for blood that was the cause, and that was the reason for their demise. They started these stupid conflicts that ended up killing them, and of course in the end they were totally ineffectual. The Sand Snakes wanted to cause revenge on the Lannisters, but they didn't manage to kill any Lannisters, apart from Myrcella Baratheon, this innocent child. They didn't kill Cersei, they didn't kill the Mountain, they didn't accomplish any of their goals. They killed more Martells than Lannisters. They killed Trystane Martell, and they killed Doran Martell. They killed their uncle in their attempts to avenge their father and aunt, which is fucking dumb. And on the one hand, maybe you can lay that on the feet of D&D, but I think you can also lay that at the feet of the Sand Snake, saying that they done goofed, and now they're suffering the consequences. And I think there actually kind of is a poetry to that, and there actually kind of is something appropriate about that. Here they are, impaled on their own weapons, brought about their own demise because of their blind lust for vengeance. So I think you can actually draw some meaning out of the death of the Sand Snakes. I'd actually say something similar about one of the other disliked scenes of this episode, which was the connection between Missandei and Grey Worm. A lot of people felt that was kind of pointless and dumb and overdrawn. I do think the scene was too long. But I do have a bit in the episode, which I won't overdo right now, but it's the idea that, like, I think there is something beautiful about, Grey Worm and Missandei were slaves. Grey Worm in particular was bred and trained to kill and to obey and to serve and to be nothing more. His body was a tool for war and nothing more. And I think it's beautiful the way a body that's used to hurt and obey is instead used to love. And I think if I can find the right wording, I think there is something quite sweet and quite emotional about that. Like in the scene, especially like I don't know if it was deliberate, but Grey Worm kept sort of looking at his hands, and he was sort of fidgeting and fiddling with his hands in the scene. And I felt like that was sort of saying that, look, these are the hands that, during his training, Grey Worm had to go and kill a baby with his hands in front of its mother. Those are the hands that were used to kill a baby. But now he was using those hands to touch and to give pleasure to Missandei. And I think there was something very sort of symbolic and beautiful about the way that was done. That said, there's only so much you can care about Missandei and Grey Worm, because they're not the most exciting characters. But yeah, I thought that was all right. So I think that sort of sums up the stuff that I wanted to touch on. That's the sort of half-hour mark. I think that's a good place to stop. So I hope you enjoyed this little sort of preview, this little discussion of some of the bits and pieces that may or may not be in the video. And I think now it's about time we answered your questions. So there's the Reddit thread. That's what I'm looking at. The link is in the description. And I'm going to look at the top comments and questions, and I'm going to respond to them. So yeah, Pixel Lily asks, does Littlefinger know about who Jon's parents are? And yeah, as I said earlier, like I think it's sort of plausible, but I'm not sure what like the purpose of that would be narratively for Littlefinger to be the one to tell Jon. Varys, I think, doesn't know either. I don't think Varys knows. You don't want to overestimate how much these guys know, because like their whole thing is about creating like this illusion of omniscience and this mystique, and Varys plays the role of the spider, and absolutely he knows a lot of shit. Absolutely he's got this great spy network, but that doesn't mean he knows everything. And it doesn't mean he knows about R plus L equals J. Like, if there was some narrative purpose to it, I could totally see Varys or Littlefinger knowing about R plus L equals J, but I'm not sure how that would necessarily work. And yeah, there was that scene, as Lover of Lemon Cakes points out, in Season 5, where Littlefinger was, like, talking about Rhaegar and Lyanna, and he sort of failed. He sort of looked like there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes when Sansa talked about Rhaegar raping Lyanna, and some people speculated that Littlefinger knew that was not actually the truth. So, like, maybe, but I don't know. I'm not sure what the point of that would be narratively. Fabricate 206 asks, what do you think Littlefinger's scheme is? Great question. Because, yeah, Littlefinger was so great in the early books and seasons, wasn't he? Because what he was doing was so purposeful. It was complex and it was difficult, but it was purposeful. He was creating conflict. He was creating war. And we saw him getting material, tangible benefits out of what he was doing. He caused the War of the Five Kings by lying about the knife that got Catelyn to abduct Tyrion Lannister, and as a result, he ended up getting Harrenhal and lordship of the fucking Riverlands as a result of his role in that war by securing the alliance with the Tyrells and stuff. And he did this stuff with killing Lysa and all of his activities in the Vale, which led to his led to his power over the Vale. And his stuff with Sansa in the North, I think, is meant to be directed towards him gaining power in the North. But the problem is when the show left the books, Littlefinger stopped making sense. His stuff where he gave Sansa to the Boltons, what was that about? It's not really clear how that helped Littlefinger. Presumably, Littlefinger's goal with that whole play was to gain control of the North somehow, presumably by making like Sansa Wardeness of the North and him ruling through her or something, but it's not at all clear how exactly that was meant to play out. And now, especially, It's not clear what Littlefinger's trying to accomplish. He's acting way too sinister. He's way too overt in his undermining of the political stability, and it's not at all clear like how it helps him to undermine the North in this way. Like, maybe his goal is to make Sansa Queen in the North and to bump off Jon Snow somehow, and to get Sansa to trust him and love him, which I don't know why he thinks that's going to start happening now, because Sansa clearly doesn't trust him or love him now. I don't know how Littlefinger thinks creeping around and acting sinister is going to change that. But presumably his goal is to gain influence over the North, as well as the Vale and the Riverlands, through Sansa. But I think it's increasingly clear that ain't gonna happen. Did Euron get stabbed in the dick or what? Probably. Skype says, given the show and the book's amount of coincidences and mirroring present with past, do you think Jon will end up dead as Ned did? I think Jon's already ended up dead, hasn't he? I don't think that the scene of Jon choking Littlefinger foreshadows Jon's death. I think, if anything, it foreshadows Littlefinger's death in this case. I know in the Ned Littlefinger scene, that was sort of the show of, like, Ned using, physical strength and force over Littlefinger in a situation when physical strength and force was useless and Littlefinger's schemes win. But as I said before, I think at this stage in the story, this is the point where schemes and plots have lost their primacy over physical strength. I think we're now in an era of the story where it's more about simple force and it's less about schemes and secrets. And I think that's something sad in some ways, but it's also a necessity of the plot, at least in the show. So no, I don't expect Littlefinger to defeat Jon Snow. I think he'll try. I don't think it's going to work out in Season 7. Chet of what? Asks, what do you think Arya's role in this is? Would she kill the Queen? Yeah, I don't think Arya's going to kill the Queen. I think there's way too much other stuff going on in Cersei's story in terms of, like, Jaime and the Valancourt, maybe some connection to Tyrion, maybe some connection to Brienne. I don't think Arya has a role in Cersei's endgame necessarily. I think what's going on with Arya's story is that whole sort of tension between, should I be a Stark, should I be an assassin? Who am I? I think it's an identity crisis for Arya. But of course, yeah, she also does need to play some kind of role in the plot, doesn't she? She needs to do something. And it's not entirely clear what that will be. I mean, yes, presumably Arya will murder someone. I don't think it'll be the people on her list. I don't think it'll be Cersei. Ilyn Payne seems to have fallen by the wayside. So who will Arya kill? What will her great accomplishment be? I don't know, man. I'm sure there'll be a moment when it comes in handy. I'm sure there'll be a moment where they're like, wow, it sure would be great if we had a magic face-changing assassin right at this point in the story. And I'm sure Arya will put up her hand and will be very useful. But yeah, I'm not sure who it will be that she will kill. Spider-Pool suggests that we'll get some kind of Nymeria ex machina, maybe. He hopes that Jorah can be like Victarion Greyjoy in the books. Because, yeah, there is that idea that after Jorah gets healed, he'll get some magical smoking volcano arm like in the books, which would be super sick, although I don't feel like that's where the show is going. It is an interesting question of, like, why is it that the grayscale curing procedure is so dangerous and scary that it's forbidden from the Citadel? Why is that the case? Is there some kind of magical component to it? I was expecting something more sort of sinister and weird and crazy in the show, but what we actually got was just Sam, like, cutting off bits of Jorah's grayscale, which was super gnarly, but it's not clear yet why that's so dangerous or why that's so crazy, and it's hard to imagine that leading to some kind of volcano arm situation. It didn't focus on Jorah's arm at all, it focused on the chest. So yeah, I don't expect Jorah to come out of this with a superpowered arm. Kalen Boy is passionately typing in the chat, what's up with Arya just suddenly deciding to go north instead? I think Kaelin's suggesting that, like, she totally flips on a dime and it's ridiculous that she changes her plan from going south to going north in an instant. I would say that that's not a fair characterization of what happens, because I think that it's clearly like an ongoing tension in Arya, really throughout her whole story, about whether her goal is to connect with her family or her goal is to kill and get revenge. And I think that's especially been explored in this season as well. I mean, last episode, that whole scene with the Lannisters, with Ed Sheeran and all that, that was all about Arya going like, wow, I want to kill because they're Lannisters, but I also want to connect like a human being because I'm a fucking human being. So, you know, I think that's been on Arya's mind. That's been an ongoing tension for a while with Arya. And I don't think it was just in that moment with Hot Pie that she changed her mind. Although finding out the knowledge that the Boltons were kicked out of Winterfell and that the Starks were now in Winterfell, I think that definitely was a critical piece of information in her decision. So that was a big deal, as it should be. But yeah, I think that whole tension's a really ongoing thing for Arya. And I don't think it was just like a sudden thing. Angela Smith points out that, yeah, she's been running the twins for 2 weeks. And yes, I think that's one of the bigger criticisms of the last episode. Like, it probably doesn't make any sense that Arya could play the role of Walder Frey, gather all of those Freys together. There was a lot about Arya's twins plot, which was a bit silly, which is a shame. What else is in the Reddit? Poor Theon. Will Theon go back to normal? Yeah, I don't know about Theon. I think one thing that they could do with him would just be to give him some kind of heroic sacrifice to, like, save his Yara or something. But would that be a great thing to do with the character? Like, some people might say that it would be better to, like, yeah, give Theon some kind of rehabilitation, allow Theon to heal, allow Theon to return to normal. All sorts of discussions about, like, what is a reasonable description of trauma and response to what he's experienced. I don't know, there's a lot of different ways you could play with Theon. I think it's really interesting what's happening with Theon in The Winds of Winter, because if I recall correctly, in that preview chapter, Theon is about to be, like, burned alive, and then Yara's like, nah, don't burn him alive, just execute him in front of the heart tree. So it looks like Theon's about to die, although I don't think he will. I think some kind of spookery will happen. But yeah, Theon's an interesting character. We really need to do an Alt-Shift-X character analysis of Theon along the lines of the Arya and the Cersei videos, because Theon is a really, really fascinating and really well-written character, I think. So I think we definitely should have a close look at those themes at some point. Yeah, and yeah, like Go T24 says, yeah, I don't think Theon had much of a choice in the situation with Euron and Yara, and I don't think it was really Theon's fault. And I think the last question we'll answer, or second last, is Xena D asks, overall, what did you think of Tyrion's battle plan? And yeah, like a lot of people have suggested online, it was pretty dumb how Daenerys's fleet must have, like, passed Dawn in order to go up to Dragonstone, and then once she arrives at Dragonstone, she sends ships down to Dawn to pick up the Dornish army and stuff, which, yeah, just sort of, in terms of geography, does not make a lot of sense. The show's geography increasingly makes not a whole lot of sense, which is kind of a shame, and I think I will take a moment to point that out in the video. But, you know, there's sort of no fun in doing this. Like, you sort of feel like you're just sort of kicking someone when they're down, when you're sort of saying that show's geography makes no sense, because, like, 90% of show viewers don't give a shit about the geography, and you can't blame them for that. Like, the job of the showrunners is to make a show that people will enjoy, and for 90% of viewers, they will not enjoy it any less if the geography doesn't make total sense. So, you know, would it be a better show to me? Would it be a better show to the 10% of people who care if they made the geography make sense? Yeah, but it's not the job of the showrunners to cater to the 10% minority. So I don't think the sort of righteous nerd rage that people get over, like, they went past Dawn. I don't know if that's constructive at all, to be honest. But yes, I think it is a bit silly, and I probably will mention it in the video. And I think the final Oh, all right. Another second last question. Isn't it weird how Qyburn, this is Super Spyman on Reddit, says, isn't it weird how Qyburn presents a big crossbow, scorpion ballista type thing to Cersei, going like, whoa, it's a crossbow, look what I've been working on, it's a crossbow. And Super Spyman points out that that technology has existed for centuries, and that a ballista or a scorpion was used to kill Meraxes, and everyone would know it. And yeah, I think that's a great point. It shouldn't be all that exciting to see a crossbow when it's ancient technology. I guess one reasonable thing you could raise is like the fact that anti-dragon weaponry has not been very relevant to modern warfare in Westeros for quite some time. So it's kind of reasonable that people might have to sort of remember how to deal with dragons. Qyburn might have had to spend some time researching to work out what happened to Meraxes and to work out how to make the weapon for it and stuff. So I think that's sort of okay. But yeah, I think it's also totally necessary to the plot that Cersei needs some kind of ability to hurt Dany's dragons, because otherwise it's just completely a stomp. But then finally, the last question I think we'll answer is, how crazy do you think Cersei will get next episode? Shostakovich has a feeling that Tyene or Ilaria are going to have to kill one another or something, and something really unpleasant is going to go down, and Jaime's reaction will be poor. And yeah, I think something like that will happen. I mean, remember what happens to Septa Mordain, right? Or not Mordain. Is it Mordain? Which one's the Shamebell Scepter? I can't remember. But when Cersei's response to the Shamebell Scepter's disrespect was to have her tortured by the Mountain. We don't know exactly what the Mountain was doing, but it looked pretty unpleasant. So if that's how she treats the Shamebell lady, how is she going to treat the woman Ilaria who murdered her only daughter Myrcella? Probably very poorly. So I expect to see something truly stomach-churning over the next episode or two in Cersei's treatment of Tyene and Ilaria. And yeah, I agree that Jaime might not enjoy it. A lot of people have complained that like Jaime's relationship to Cersei has not changed or gone anywhere in the last like 4 seasons. In the books, of course, there's this really sort of interesting thing where Jaime starts to sort of drift from Cersei. He recognizes that she's increasingly unhinged. He arguably tries to sort of make himself a better person, and part of that is rejecting Cersei. But that doesn't seem to be happening at all in the show. And a lot of viewers are sort of waiting for the moment when Jaime starts to diverge and starts to question his relationship. But it has not yet happened. Maybe the stuff with the Sand Snakes will be what triggers that change. But I don't know. Maybe the showrunners are going for something different with Show Jaime. Maybe they're going with a different direction. I'm not really sure. But I think the end will probably be the same. I think it makes the most sense for Jaime to be the one to kill Cersei. I think that'll happen in both books and show. But I suppose we will have to wait to find out. Unella, Septa Unella, I think. Thank you, Ostracilindra Puntia and Cardinal Doomsday. Alright, I think that concludes this live stream. About 40 minutes, about same as the last time. I hope you enjoyed this live stream. This was the second ever of its type. We're going to keep sort of evolving how this works, I think. We're open to any suggestions. If you've got ideas about how you want this live stream to work, I try to keep it sort of responsive. I try to also say things that make sense. Vineyard Dog points out that Euron is a younger brother, so maybe he's the Valancourt. So Sandor, maybe it'll be Sandor and Euron together, the two maddest younger brothers in the series choking Cersei at once. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this live stream. Is there anything else to say? I don't think there is. But thank you all for supporting Alt Shift X on Patreon. Everyone who is here is someone who supports the channel, and I cannot thank you all enough, because this whole business of making a video every week, more than every week with the bloody Comic-Con video, would be truly impossible without your support. So thank you for that. And we'll have another live stream for you in a week, and we'll have Season 7, Episode 2 explained for you in roughly a couple of days. So get keen for that. Everyone have a lovely week, and I'll see y'all next time. Cheers.